Okay, today we are going to make a brief presentation on the topic is poverty, and we are going to look at poverty from Pakistan's point of view. So let's quickly look into this. Poverty is, of course, as we all know, it's a situation in which people are unable to afford the material things in life. So if you're unable to afford, then you fall in the category of the poor. Now, poverty is divided into two categories. The first is absolute poverty. Absolute poverty is a situation in which people are unable to afford the basic necessities of life. Now, for absolute poverty, also there's a World Bank definition as to what will be considered absolute. Absolute poverty is that poverty in which people earn up to or under $1.9 a day. All right. This is it. Now, absolute poverty, there are various reasons for absolute poverty. Now, these economic phenomena were basically studied during the market crash in 1929. And one of the reasons for absolute poverty was, which was discovered, was unemployment. If people are unemployed, then what do? They start eating from their savings, and they reach a point where no further savings are left, and they become absolutely destitute and absolutely poor. Another reason for absolute poverty is a situation of conflict. If war is going on in a certain area and war is constantly going on, then sooner or later people are going to lose all their jobs. There's going to be no production. When there's no production, people are unable to produce, and they're unable to find jobs, and that is when they become destitute and absolutely poor. Another situation occurs in third world countries, especially African countries, where governments or society as a whole is not able to provide the basic necessities which are required to to sustain a poverty minus, a poverty less existence. Another now let's talk about some of the examples of absolute poverty. One example of absolute poverty is homelessness. When people are homeless, it means that they are unable to afford shelter. Shelter is a basic necessity, but if you are homeless, it means that you are unable to afford shelter. So that is an example of absolute poverty. Homelessness or absolute poverty can also stem from disability. Please keep in mind that disability has traditionally been a very strong factor. Two factors: disease and uh, disability. These two factors have been two of the very strong traditional factors that contribute to absolute poverty. Now we talk about relative poverty. Now, what is relative poverty? Relative poverty means that a person may not be poor in absolute terms. In absolute terms, he's a well-to-do person. But the World Bank says that, look, if we take a median, if we assume that people in a certain country, a relative number of people in a certain country are earning, let's say, $100, and you are earning 40% less than that, you are earning $40 less than that, and you are earning $60. So now, compared to the person who's making $100, you have become relatively poor. And a classic example of that is when we divide a society into classes. What do we see? The people in the middle class are not poor people. They're not poor. They're not absolutely poor. They have their briefcases which they pick up every morning and they go to the office. But they are not absolutely poor, but they may be relatively poorer as compared to people who are rich, their own employers, their own factory owners. So these are some examples. Now, the job of society as a whole. Why do we live together? I mean, that's the basic question. Why we are social animals? Why are we living together? We are living together so that we can all progress and succeed together. It is to be achieved together. Society moves forward together. And in that, government lends a helping hand. People lend helping hands to one another, and they try to increase their wealth. Please do keep in mind that economics is the study of wealth. Okay, economics at the end of the day is the study of what? It's the study of wealth. So um, uh, if people are to get richer, how can they do that? One way they can do that is by increasing their national income. Now, national income, we have heard words like GNP, gross national product, NNP, net national product, net domestic product, net economic value. What are all these things? These are just methods of measuring a country's income. All right, just like you have one person's income, you have a country's income. So when a country makes more income, it becomes a rich country. And this is one way of helping the poor to become rich. So GDP makes a country rich. But does it necessarily make the people in a country rich? The people in the country as a whole becomes rich, yes. But do people, individuals in a country become rich also? Yes, probably. But sometimes yes, sometimes no, and we will see how. Now, when the country earns a certain amount of money, let's say a country is earning $12,000, just an example, it's an assumption, and there are six people in a country. So, what do? We divide the GDP by the number of people. Six persons in that country, 12,000 is the $12,000 is the income of that country. So what do? 12,000 divided by 6. One person gets $2,000. All right. This $2,000 that one person is getting is the GDP per head or GDP per capita. So GDP per capita. What is GDP per capita? GDP per capita is simply you divide the wealth over the number of people in the country. All right. So on one household or on one person, whichever way you want to calculate it, the money that should come if a country is making 12,000, then one person should make $200. He should. But is it necessary? No, it's not necessary. If two people in the country are keeping the wealth of all the six people, then two people will become rich, four will remain poor. So yes, there is one way of pulling people out of poverty is increasing the GDP. But when you increase the GDP or you increase the national income, if you don't divide it properly among people, you don't divide it equitably among people, then people will continue to remain poor. Let's see uh, uh, what GDP is. So GDP then becomes the market value of all the goods that you are producing. You're producing a good, selling it in the market. You're selling it in the market, you're making money. That money is making you rich. And one way of increasing the wealth or the GDP of a country is to engage in trade. Okay, please do keep in mind that all the prevailing superpowers in the world have always been the strongest in trade and the strongest in GDP. When England was the superpower of the world, when England was the biggest empire, by the way, Britain is the biggest empire in history. How did it become the empire? Because all of the trading ships in till the 19th century, 40% of those ships on the high seas were British ships. It was very active in trade. Britain was very active in trade, and that trend hasn't ended till today. Till today, the countries which are powerful are they have very strong GDP, GDP bottom lines. So that this GDP bottom line and the countries becoming strong because of GDP is the thing that we will see in the second part of this video. I'm going to show you that the strongest countries in the world are those which have the highest GDP, which have the highest national income, which have the highest output. And this output can be driven by trade and by production. We will see that in the forthcoming video, so please stay tuned for that. But right now, I want you to appreciate one fact that in the 20th century, the greatest invention of man, remember, 20th century, the year 1900 to 1999, this is the century of creation, invention, and innovation. And some people believe that the greatest invention of the 20th century was not the airplane, it was not the atomic bomb. It was the place, it was the thing that made these inventions possible, and that invention is organization. Scientifically driven large organizations which made mass production, creative products, wealth generation in the final analysis possible, and the countries which had the largest organizations became the most powerful and the most rich countries of the world. All right, so we are going to look into the countries with the highest GDP, and we are going to look at the countries, some of the countries with the highest, uh, with the best organizations. We are going to have a look at these countries in the upcoming video. All right, so please stay tuned for the second part of this.